Welcome to another edition of Spooky Reviews from Spooky Ventures. This one is our 38th edition, and I'm looking at the new double-disc Blu-ray release of A.K. Tolstoy's A Taste of Blood from Cleopatra. And before I really dig in on the movie, let me just clear one thing up immediately. When I say that this is a double disc, you might picture lots of extra video material. Well, that's not what we get here. In fact, other than the trailers to other movies, this is largely devoid of bonuses of the video variety. That second disc is actually an audio CD containing the soundtrack to the movie. Given the interesting goth music heard throughout, I think it's actually a nice touch, but I don't want to get anyone's hopes up for something that this doesn't deliver. So that means that the movie itself is really the whole point of this release. But then again, shouldn't it always be? So what is this film? Well, here's where I'm probably going to get a little geeky. You see, this is a vampire movie, and I am actually a big fan of all things vampire, going all the way back to Barnabas Collins and Dark Shadows, which I hurried home from grade school to watch every single day. I really am a bit of a vampire geek, if you want to know the truth. I've published 2 collections of vampire stories, some fiction and some non, featuring various writers, including my own works. I'm working toward assembling a collection of my own vampire stories, sort of interwoven with connecting pieces, since all my vampire tales exist in a shared universe and have recurring characters. My interest in vampires extends to the legends of the bloodsuckers that exist around the world. In fact, the most recent collection I put together includes a number of non-fiction tales that tell about some of the more prominent vampire stories that are out there as, quote, real. Now, one aspect of this movie really made me geek out a bit. That's because rather than the Bram Stoker Dracula school of vampire that we often get, this one works on an Eastern European vampire legend called the Vertolac. I think I'm pronouncing that right. One of the ways these vampires differ from the ones we're used to in fiction is that they tend to prey on those close to them in life, family members and friends, more than they do random people. Well, at least that's one aspect that they kept about this type of creature. In legend, there are some pretty specific rituals required to keep the Vertolac from coming back after being killed, but the movie makers seem to have ignored that part of the legend. Still, I'm just happy to see the nod to this often overlooked, at least in Western culture, type of bloodsucker. So that is one aspect of the film that worked really well for me. Another is that soundtrack I mentioned. The gothic music seems to suit the gritty, dark texture of the movie. Another thing this has going for it is a sense of suspense that is often manifest as paranoia. We get mystery and that suspense early before we really understand what's going on at all. And that works well at sort of getting your expectations up and getting you sort of prepared for weirdness to come. Then, once the secret is out and the father goes out to hunt a vampire and comes back, there's a different level of suspense that sets in. Much like John Carpenter's The Thing, there is a distrust and paranoia that comes with it. The family and also the viewer isn't positive if the man who came back is really the father or a Vertolac version of him. Different people in the family have different opinions, and I really wasn't sure myself. I kept going back and forth on it. I mean, there were reasons to believe he was still human, but others to believe that he'd been infected. The paranoia ultimately leads to members of the family turning against one another. One thing about the movie that I found a little confusing and odd is that some of the dialogue is in English, although I think it's dubbed, while other parts are in Spanish with subtitles. Now, when I started watching, I thought that there might be a grand scheme for why they did that. For instance, it seems that the older characters have their lines subtitled, while the younger ones redid their lines in English for dubbing. Now, perhaps it literally comes down to the younger actors being bilingual while the older ones aren't. This was filmed in Argentina, so you understand the Spanish aspect from that point of view. Now, they never make it clear in the film, though, so really your guess is as good as mine as to why they did that. Overall, then, this is a moody vampire tale that gives a nod to some vampire lore that is often overlooked in movies. It does a great job of creating suspense and paranoia. It can get pretty gory at times, but overall is more of a slow burn, thoughtful film. I really liked it quite a bit, but then again, as I said, I'm a vampire geek. Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.